Welcome back, students. We'll continue our discussion on sandcasting process. So previously we discussed what is the sandcasting process and how the process is carried out. So now we'll move on to the concept of sand preparation. So as I said, we have various types of sand. Why we are using a mixture of sand? Because every sand has its own advantages. For example, if you take sand, uh, your desert sand, it is highly permeable in nature. So, what is permeability? It's the ability to allow material to pass through it. For example, if you pour water on desert sand, what happens? It flows freely through it. But if we pour water on clay, what happens? It retains the moisture. So, where this property would come in handy is because when we are using a sand casting process, the molten metal will be poured inside the sand. So what the sand should do is it should allow the air to flow through it freely. Because if air is not flowing through and air is trapped, what happens is that it will lead to defects. So hence air should be able to flow freely through the sand. So in that sense, river sand is useful. But the main application of sand casting is that you have to prepare a mold. So for that, you cannot use desert sand because if you place an object in desert sand and remove it, there will be no impression because it is highly permeable. Then you need the property of clay here. When you place an object on clay and remove it, what happens? The clay retains the shape of the object. So there, the shape retention property is needed. So then there is a property called as grain size. So we need the casting to be as smooth as possible. In order to get a smooth surface of the casting, we need the sand to be smooth in nature. So the grain should be smaller. We have larger grains. What happens is that the final shape of the casting may be distorted. So we need a smooth surfaced casting. For that, what we need? We need better properties. So hence, we need properties of everything. That's why we are using a sand called as green sand. So the property of this green sand is that it will have flowability. As you can see here, it will be flowable, it will be reusable, it will be having better grain size, smaller grain size, permeable as well as reusable. So everything constitutes to combination of different sands. So we'll be using a combination of different sands such as river sand, uh, clay, desert sand, as well as you will be using coal. So why we are using these things, we will see in the subsequent videos. So remember that the sand which we are using for sand casting process is actually called as green sand. So now we'll get into the actual process. So now we have defined the sand which we are going to use, which is green sand. Next step is to create a pattern. So if you see the first image, so if you see this first image, you are having a pattern. This orange thing is called as the pattern. So this is the shape of the object which you are going to make. If you see the subsequent images, you can see that these two come together and form an object like this. So this is where the molten metal will be poured. So the object which we are making through the sand casting process, imagine it's a box. So we are having two boxes here, cut section of two boxes. So these two boxes together combined form a single object. So once the pattern is produced, so I asked a question earlier, why we are directly not using, for example, if we are making a dumbbell, why not use the dumbbell directly to make the object? So this will be your next assignment. You analyze yourself. If I am using the same object to make a replica, what are the downsides of that? Will I get the exact shape and size at the end of casting? You analyze that and we'll discuss in the next class. So coming back here, once the pattern is produced, Our next step is to place it inside the sand and make an impression. Once the pattern is removed, you will get a cavity like this. The second image, a cavity like this, which is actually called as the mold cavity. And then we will be placing runner and riser to make the sand flow easily inside. And once that is done, we can pour the molten metal inside. So we will see the steps involved in the sand casting process in the upcoming lectures. Thank you, students.